Okay, picture this. A World Cup, but it's like exploding across an entire continent. More teams than we've ever seen before, packed with tech that sounds almost like science fiction, and a really serious commitment to being green. That's basically the picture for 2026.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. The sheer scale, the geographic spread of 2026, it's really pushing innovation in so many areas, especially when you think back to Qatar in 2022, which was, well, much more contained geographically, though still technologically impressive in its own way.
Exactly. And that's really what we want to dive into today. We're going to unpack the key advancements planned for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, especially looking at how it stacks up against Qatar 2022, using the info you shared.
Right. Our goal here is to give you a clear sense of the big changes, the innovations coming in tech, infrastructure, sustainability, fan experience, all of it. We want to highlight what makes 2026, potentially a really significant leap forward for this kind of global event.
Okay, so let's kick off with the scale. 48 teams. 16 cities across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. I mean, this is the biggest World Cup ever, right?
Oh, absolutely. Biggest by far. And this expansion, it's not just about more matches, though there will be many more matches. It really fundamentally changes the tournament structure itself.
How so?
Well, you'll have 12 groups of 4 teams. The top 2 from each group go through, plus the 8 best third-place teams. So that leads to a bigger knockout stage and a lot more games overall compared to the 64 we saw in the 32-team format.
Right. I saw a note about the total number of matches being way higher. That makes sense with the extra teams and the format change. It creates more paths to the knockout rounds.
Exactly. Significantly more matches. And it means more opportunities, potentially, for nations that maybe haven't always been regulars at the World Cup. It kind of opens the door a bit wider.
Yeah, which is really exciting, isn't it? Thinking about teams maybe like Jamaica or Uzbekistan, perhaps getting their debut on this massive stage.
Precisely. This new format offers, a clearer pathway for some of those emerging football nations to qualify and really test themselves. Of course, that also adds new layers of strategy for the traditional powerhouses, too. Maybe they need to manage squads differently earlier on.
It's such a stark contrast to Qatar 2022. That was all in one country, right?
Yeah.
8 stadiums pretty much clustered around Doha within about, 35 miles?
Yeah, exactly. That very concentrated setup in Qatar definitely allowed for a highly centralized approach, for logistics, for security. But it also meant they needed a huge amount of sort of temporary infrastructure to cope with everyone being in such a small area.
In 2026, the distances are just mind-boggling in comparison. You mentioned 3,100 miles between the furthest venues. That's a continent.
It absolutely is. And yes, that's a massive logistical challenge, no doubt about it. But on the flip side, that spread offers some really cool possibilities too. For fans, it's a chance to experience totally different cultures across North America. And for the host countries, the economic boost gets spread out over a much wider area.
Okay, so bigger scale, bigger distances. Sounds like bigger tech too. What's the leap forward on the technology front for 2026?
Well, what's really interesting is how they're building on what Qatar started. We saw VAR introduced there, right? Semi-automated offside tech too. 2026 looks set to take officiating tech to the next level, integrating more AI-powered tools.
AI officiating, wow. Okay, how's that actually going to work in practice?
So we're talking about things like real-time player tracking, using sensors and cameras, feeding into automated offside detection systems. FIFA trials suggested this could potentially cut down human errors in those, really crucial calls by maybe up to 40%.
40%, that's huge. Does that mean fewer of those agonizing waits for the VAR check?
That's definitely the goal. Faster decisions, more consistent accuracy. And for you watching, maybe in the stadium, this data might feed into AR features on stadium apps. Imagine seeing the offside line pop up on your phone, overlaid on the live pitch.
Okay, so Qatar had VAR, but 2026 is integrating AI much more deeply. What about the actual stadiums? Are they getting a tech upgrade too?
Oh, for sure. Think about stadiums like Dallas's AT&T Stadium, the one with the retractable roof. That guarantees perfect playing conditions, rain or shine, hot or cold, which is quite different from Qatar's stadiums, which were amazing but relied more on powerful air conditioning within fixed structures.
Right, so climate control becomes less of an issue. What other smart features are we talking about?
Well, these big multi-use arenas, they'll have full 5G connectivity everywhere. They're talking about dynamic seating systems, maybe seats that could subtly react to game intensity. Still sounds a bit sci-fi, but it's being discussed. And definitely AI-powered concession systems. The idea is to slash those wait times for food and drinks.
Yes. Anything to shorten the queue for a halftime pie is good news. And with bigger crowds like MetLife holding over 92,000 compared to Lusail's, 89,000?
Yeah.
Those efficiencies are crucial.
Exactly. Better flow, less waiting. The whole tech integration is aimed at making the experience smoother, more comfortable, just better for everyone there.
Now, sustainability. That was obviously a massive discussion point around Qatar 2022. It sounds like it's an even bigger focus for 2026.
It absolutely is. The organizers have set some really ambitious targets. They're actually aiming to make 2026 the first ever carbon-neutral World Cup, which, as you can imagine, involves a pretty complex, multi-layered strategy.
Carbon neutral for an event spanning 3 huge countries.
Yeah.
That sounds like an enormous challenge.
It's a monumental task, definitely. But they've set clear benchmarks, like all the stadiums are aiming for AD Gold certification.
AD Gold. Remind us what that signifies.
So ALED is basically a global standard for green building design and operation. Gold is a very high level, meaning the stadiums have to meet strict criteria for things like energy efficiency, water use, sustainable materials, indoor environmental quality, the works.
Okay, so the buildings themselves are designed to be green. What about powering these massive events?
The big commitment there is 100% clean power for the stadiums. That means using things like on-site solar panels. Some projections say they could generate maybe 40% of a stadium's needs right there, plus geothermal heating systems, even biomass generators in some places. It's a real shift from Qatar's reliance largely on liquefied natural gas.
And water. That's always a big issue for huge events.
Yep, they're putting in advanced water recycling systems. The projected savings are pretty staggering, enough water annually, they say, to fill about 180 Olympic swimming pools.
Wow, that's a lot of water and waste. Millions of fans generate tons of rubbish.
The target there is zero waste. A 90% diversion rate from landfill is the goal. So that means things like compostable food packaging, lots of water refill stations to cut down on plastic bottles, and even using AI in sorting facilities to maximize recycling efficiency.
A really comprehensive approach then. But what about transport? Getting millions of people across 3 countries, that must generate huge emissions, surely more than Qatar's compact setup.
That's a really key point. Qatar's size made things like electric shuttle buses for short trips feasible. North America is a different beast altogether. So a big part of the plan for 2026 involves developing high-speed rail corridors. The aim is to cut down the need for domestic flights between host cities by an estimated 35%.
High-speed rail connecting major North American cities. That would be a legacy far beyond football, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It's a huge infrastructure piece. And for the emissions they can't eliminate through rail or other means, they're planning major reforestation projects. We're talking about planting an area equivalent to something like 150,000 football fields with new trees to offset the remaining carbon footprint. It shows they're learning from past challenges.
Okay, let's shift back to the fans inside the stadium. You mentioned smart venues. What does that actually feel like for someone sitting in the stands in 2026?
Well, think comfort and personalization. These places will have things like zonal cooling systems. So using sensors, they can adjust airflow and temperature in real time, maybe focusing more cooling on packed sections. You'll also see things like solar reflective roofing to reduce heat gain, and maybe even biodegradable misting systems for cooling that's more eco-friendly.
So aiming for a more pleasant environment regardless of the weather or the crowd size. What about the actual seats and accessibility?
Yeah, big focus on inclusivity. Expect wider seats as standard, probably with cup holders and USB ports built in. And for accessibility, things like better sight lines for wheelchair users, tactile maps for the visually impaired, maybe even app controls for adjusting your seat's recliner temperature.
App-controlled seats. Okay, that's definitely next-level personalization. And you mentioned augmented reality earlier.
Yeah.
How does that play out for the fan in the stadium?
Right. It's about adding layers of information onto what you're seeing live. So you point your phone at the pitch using a dedicated app, and you could see live player stats pop up, or heat maps showing where players have been running. Maybe even get 3D replays of controversial calls right there on your device. It's way beyond just seeing basic stats on the big screen like in 2022. It's more interactive, more data-rich.
Like having your own personal stats dashboard overlaid on the real game. Cool. Now, getting between these far-flung cities, that's the big travel challenge. What transport tech is tackling that?
Yeah, this is where some major infrastructure upgrades come in. We mentioned high-speed rail, new corridors like the Texas Triangle, upgrading existing lines like Amtrak, aiming for speeds over 200 miles per hour. That alone offers way more capacity than, say, Qatar's metro system could handle for those kinds of distances.
But coordinating all that travel across 3 countries, different time zones, Sounds like a nightmare.
Well, that's where AI steps in again. They're planning AI-powered traffic management systems. These systems will crunch huge amounts of data, predicting stadium traffic hours in advance, checking parking availability, border crossing times, public transport loads, and then dynamically rerouting fans to avoid bottlenecks. It's a much more sophisticated, continent-wide approach compared to the localized traffic solutions in Qatar.
Predictive routing. That could be a lifesaver for fans trying to get to games on time. What about those drone shuttles? That sounded very futuristic.
Yeah, the eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, basically like large drones or small electric aircraft. The idea is to use these for shorter hops within certain cities, maybe LA or Toronto, connecting designated skyports to the stadiums. They're zero emission and could potentially move thousands of fans per hour per site. It's a totally different concept to the ground shuttles used before.
Wow. High-speed trains and flying taxis. Getting around in 2026 could be quite an adventure. What about engaging if you can't be there? How's the digital fan experience changing?
This is where the metaverse really comes into play. FIFA's planning an official platform where you can join virtual viewing parties. Imagine digital replicas of the actual stadiums, customizing your own avatar, chatting with fans from all over the world using spatial audio, maybe even virtual high fives after a goal. They're expecting potentially millions of people to engage this way.
A global virtual stadium experience. That's pretty wild. What if you're just watching on TV or streaming? Any upgrades there?
Oh yeah. The streaming is set to become much more personalized. Think AI learning what you like to watch. Do you prefer the wide tactical camera or close-ups on your favorite player? The service could adapt the feed in real time. You might even be able to mix, say, 4 different camera feeds yourself, save preferred angles, share custom clips. It's a big jump from the few fixed camera options we had before.
So like being your own broadcast director. Very cool. Okay, with all these people, physical and virtual security must be paramount. What's new for 2026 on that front?
They're leveraging tech there, too. Biometric screening systems are planned using facial recognition for ticket and ID checks. The aim is faster, smoother entry into venues, potentially cutting wait times significantly. And importantly, they stress the data is encrypted immediately and deleted after the tournament.
Faster entry is always good. What about monitoring things inside and around the stadiums?
That's where drone surveillance networks come in. Autonomous drones using thermal cameras and AI analysis to monitor crowd flow, detect unusual activity, potential security issues. They're designed to be discreet, adjusting altitude to reduce noise, especially at night, and programmed to focus on safety, not, eavesdropping.
Makes sense.
Dave.
Okay, let's switch to the money side. Hosting a World Cup is obviously a massive economic event. How do the projections for 2026 compare to Qatar?
Well, the headline number is pretty striking. Projected revenue for 2026 is around $5 billion. That's nearly triple the roughly $1.8 billion Qatar generated. A lot of that comes down to the expanded format, more games, more sponsorship opportunities, and sharing the load across 3 host nations.
Wow, triple the revenue. And tourism numbers must be projected to be way up too.
Oh, massively. They're forecasting over 5 million international visitors. Compare that to about 1.4 million for Qatar. That's a huge jump, over 250% increase. Host cities are already planning things like special hotel deals, cultural festivals, airline promotions to really capture that wave of visitors.
And beyond the tournament itself, what about lasting benefits? Infrastructure, that sort of thing.
This is where they're emphasizing a legacy-first approach. There's about $10 billion in infrastructure upgrades already happening, airport expansions, public transit projects in places like Dallas, Toronto, Mexico City. And unlike some past events where stadiums became white elephants, the 2026 venues are being designed for long-term use.
Yeah.
Think converting parts into retail spaces, community health clinics, tech conference centers, making them useful after the football finishes.
That sounds much more sustainable long-term. Now, you've got this incredible diversity across the host cities in North America. How is the tournament planning to reflect that culturally?
That's a really big focus. They want to make sure the tournament celebrates the unique character of each host city and region. So expect localized experiences, maybe drawing on the market culture in Mexico City, or the mix of Hollywood and, say, Oaxacan culture in LA, or the multicultural fan zones you'd expect in Toronto.
So it's not just the generic World Cup dropped into a city. It's meant to integrate with the local vibe.
Exactly. They're even planning 11 specific cultural hubs in major cities. These will feature things like indigenous art installations, live mural painting, stages for diverse musical acts. It's really meant as a platform for cultural exchange.
That sounds great. But with fans and teams from all over the world, plus the languages within North America itself, How do you handle communication?
Technology, again, plays a role. They're planning AI-powered translation apps that can handle over 15 languages, apparently including some indigenous languages like Nahuatl and also Haitian Creole. That's a big step up. Plus, simpler things like stadium staff wearing badges showing which languages they speak, real-time captioning in multiple languages in the venues, even multilingual announcements on public transport.
Really trying to break down those language barriers. Okay, finally, let's talk players. Any tech focused on them? Performance, safety.
Absolutely. The training facilities are getting serious upgrades. Smart centers that can actually simulate match conditions, altitude, air density changes, specialized turf that monitors hydration levels, huge AI video walls for analyzing opponents, advanced recovery pods using cryotherapy, infrared, the whole 9 yards.
Simulating match conditions.
Yeah.
That's clever. What about tech the players actually wear?
Yeah, wearable tech is getting incredibly advanced. We're talking biometric patches, apparently thinner than a Band-Aid, measuring heart rate in real time, even flagging stress levels. Plus tech that can detect tiny muscle micro-tears as they happen, and even analyze sweat composition on a nanoscale level for super precise hydration tracking.
Live muscle tear detection. That could potentially prevent a lot of serious injuries, couldn't it?
That's the hope. Team doctors would get instant alerts for critical health signs. There's even talk of AI suggesting potential substitutions based on predicting fatigue or injury risk. It's partly a response to seeing muscle injuries increase in recent tournaments like Qatar 2022.
So, tech helping performance and player welfare. Good to hear. And for us watching at home, one last thing, any broadcasting breakthroughs to expect?
Get ready for your eyeballs to pop. 8K resolution broadcasts are planned for many key games. That's 4 times the detail of 4K. 33 million pixels. You'll need a compatible TV and a decent internet connection, obviously, but the visual quality should be stunning, real sensory immersion.
8K, wow. And beyond just the picture quality,
Right.
anything making the broadcast itself more engaging.
Yeah, much more interactivity. Companion apps will let you do things like switch between different commentary teams instantly. You could adjust the audio mix, maybe turn up the crowd noise, turn down the commentators, rewind key plays immediately and see them from different angles you choose. It's about giving the viewer much more control, making it feel more like a collaborative experience, not just passively watching.
Okay, wow. So from this huge expanded format, the AI, the smart stadiums, the massive focus on sustainability, right through to these incredibly personalized fan experiences. 2026 really is shaping up to be something else entirely, a genuinely advanced global event.
I think so. It feels like you won't just be watching top-tier football. You'll be part of something bigger, this tech-infused, culturally diverse, hopefully environmentally conscious global gathering. Whether you manage to get there in person or you're connecting digitally, it feels like these innovations are really designed to put you, the fan, right at the center of it all.
Yeah. And as we look towards 2026, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How will all these advancements in sports tech, in large-scale event management, in sustainability, how might they influence other things, not just future World Cups, but maybe other global events, maybe even just our everyday lives and how we connect? What other boundaries do you think are going to get pushed next in this space?